Alchemy of Souls brings you into a magical, fantastical land of magic and mages, who are led by a mage named Jung Gang, who can tap into the power of the lake around their land, which is named Lake Gyeongchon Daeho. One day, Jung Gang is summoned to the royal palace, where the sick king demands that he switch souls with Jung Gang for exactly 7 days using the mysterious forbidden spell called the Alchemy of Souls. Reluctantly, Jung Gang agrees and performs the spell, allowing the king to take control of his body. During this time, the king sleeps with Jung Gang's wife, Dohwa, and she bears a child with the king, dying in the process. She named the baby Jang Uk. Fast forward 20 years, and Jang Uk is trying to train to become a mage. However, he is struggling because Jung Gang, having come into his own body after the 7 days had finished, and realizing that the child was born under the mystical king's star, had blocked Jang Uk's energy gate as a baby in order to keep him safe before disappearing. Elsewhere, a tough shadow assassin named Naksu is fending off royal soldiers. However, she ends up getting hurt in the fight. To save her own life, Naksu manages to use the Alchemy of Souls to shift her soul into the body of a blind girl that she finds, named Mu-Deok. Although she is able to see, as Mu-Deok, Naksu loses her powers and has to adapt without her strength. At the same time, Jang Uk continues his training at a monastery in the mountains, but defiant and determined, Jang Uk has been starting to feel like he needs a new teacher. When he runs into Mu-Deok, who has come into town for revenge against the royal soldiers who were attacking her, Jang Uk brings her back to the palace, noticing how similar she is to the famous mage Naksu. Mu-Deok starts to work as Jang Uk's maid. Not only does working as Jang Uk's maid give Mu-Deok an excuse to be in the palace, but it might also give her an idea of how to get her power back. Specifically, she needs to get to her sword. As for Jang Uk, when he notices Mu-Deok's eyes which hold the trace of someone whose soul has been switched, he makes up his mind. Mu-Deok is destined to be his master. One day, a compulsory meeting is called by Park Jin, the leader of Songrim, which is like a school for mages. Park Jin explains that he is suspicious that there is a traitor who has helped the assassins who recently attacked Songrim. To find out if there might be any soul shifters among them, a Jin family heirloom called a Guiju is used. Initially, it targets Jang Uk, who was standing in front of Mu-Deok, but the real traitor, who has the blue-gray skin of a shifter, is found and defeated by Seo Yul, one of Jang Uk's best friends along with Dong-gu. Having found Naksu's body and her sword, the royal court and Park Jin agree to burn the body and keep the sword. Jang Uk, intrigued by the sword, later shows the sword to Mu-Deok, but despite her many strong efforts and struggles, Mu-Deok can't seem to unsheath it. Feeling hopeless, Mu-Deok jumps into Lake Gyeongchon Daeho, where the water helps her get some of her magical energy back, at least enough to unsheath her sword. When Jang Uk finds Mu-Deok, she's collapsed, and he takes her to the infirmary. There, Mu-Deok poisons Jang Uk to force the opening of his gate of energy, knowing it's the only way to help him. It's official. Mu-Deok is going to start training Jang Uk. With Ho Yam, a mage physician, having been forced to open Jang Uk's gate of energy which saves him from the poison, Mu-Deok starts teaching Jang Uk the essential techniques, Jipsu, Ryusu, and Chisu. Jang Uk confidently promises to achieve in 3 months what Jung Gang took a year to learn. However, this gets more difficult after Jang Uk and Mu-Deok are banished from Songrim, and the Crown Prince arrives to claim Jung Gang's sword, which leads to a duel with Jang Uk. Jang Uk is not about to let the Crown Prince walk away with his father's sword. In the end, Mu-Deok interferes with the fight by spilling chamber pot water, causing the Crown Prince to lose the duel. In addition to winning the fight, Jang Uk also finally manages to unsheath Jung Gang's sword. Having mastered Ryusu in no time at all, Park Jin, impressed by Jang Uk's skills but concerned about his uncontrolled energy, orders Jang Uk to remove the binding bracelet suppressing his power, which results in Jang Uk uncontrollably hurting Park Jin. Park Jin also tells Jang Uk the story of how he was born, which overwhelms Jang Uk. His whole life, he believed that he was the son of Jung Gang. Shocked, Jang Uk gives up training, despite Mu-Deok trying to persuade him not to. However, when Jinmu suggests that Jang Uk needs to be beheaded for his disrespect, Mu-Deok convinces Jang Uk that, to save his own life, he needs to duel the Crown Prince again to prove his skills. For context, Jinmu is an evil man. Despite being trained by Jung Gang, Jinmu is full of greed and was the one who taught Naksu to be an assassin. Agreeing, Jang Uk and Mu-Deok head towards Danhyangak, Naksu's hometown. In Danhyangak, Mu-Deok and Jung Uk stay with a cabin owner named Master Lee, who confronts Jang Uk and effortlessly counters his attack. It turns out Master Lee is an expert mage. With two amazing mages living with him, Jang Uk can only get better and stronger. Despite enjoying his stay in Danhyang-gak, Jang Uk decides that he has to go back to address the rumors that have started circulating about his marriage to Jin Choyeon. Following Jang Uk back to town, after being tricked by Jin Choyeon into going to the Jin family with a broken yin-yang jade, Mu-Deok is drawn to Jin Yo-won, a large cave-like maze area where the Jin family keep their magical heirlooms and treasures. In Jin Yo-won, Mu-Deok gets sucked into a strange mirror. At the same time, the Crown Prince and Yul, who had met Naksu in his childhood, start experiencing seductive illusions. Later, Jang Uk, Yul, and the Crown Prince decide to venture into Jin Yo-won, despite warnings about the dangerous relics inside, to look for Mu-Deok. Finding Mu-Deok trapped in the mirror, Jang Uk realizes that the mirror needs a reflection and solves the mirror's riddle by covering it with a cloth, allowing him to speak with Mu-Deok and ultimately rescue her. As the mirror shatters, Mu-Deok is freed. Escaping Jin Yo-won, Yul finally puts it together that Mu-Deok is Naksu, the same Naksu who he spent time with in Danhyang-gak as a child. Amidst everything that is happening, Mu-Deok starts to be blackmailed by Gilju, a member of the royal court, also named Chonbu-gwan. Basically, Gilju wants Mu-Deok to bring Jung Uk so he can perform a soul shift into Jung Uk's body. Telling Jung Uk this, when they get to the temple, Gilju and Jung Uk start fighting. As Jung Uk uses the Tansu technique to fight off Gilju, Gilju starts to perform the Alchemy of Souls. Just as Jung Uk's soul seems to be in danger, Mu-Deok manages to pull him back, and before Jung Uk knows it, he is back on the ground, more powerful than ever. Gilju's condition, on the other hand, worsens as his skin turns gray. Trying to enter the royal palace, Gilju is killed by Jang Uk, leaving Mu-Deok to run away through the woods. Catching up, Yul used his magic to heal Mu-Deok's poisoned cuts. A few days later, the much-anticipated duel between Jang Uk and the Crown Prince also takes place. And battling it out, Jang Uk wins by using the same Tansu technique that Mu-Deok taught him, which, naturally, shocks both Jin Mu and Park Jin. Having proven his skills by winning the duel, Jang Uk is offered a choice between Songrim and the other houses, and he decides to join Songrim, following Mu-Deok's advice. Now a fully recognized mage with his own spirit plaque, which is like a key that lets you in and out of Songrim, Jang Uk finally gains access to all the facilities of Songrim. To celebrate Jang Uk getting into Songrim, a huge party is thrown. Later, Jang Uk, now fully drunk, finds himself separated from Mu-Deok due to the strict rules of Songrim, which forbid personal servants. However, in the rain, Yul stays by Mu-Deok's side, offering her an umbrella. As the days go on, Mu-Deok becomes more and more determined to join Jung Uk inside Songrim, even entering a maid contest and successfully passing both the exam and the physical test, helped along secretly by Yul, Dong-gu, and the Crown Prince, despite Jin Mu's attempts to turn the Crown Prince against Jung Uk and Mu-Deok. As Park Jin watches Mu-Deok's impressive performance, he can't help but suspect that she may be more than just a simple maid. Struggling with her own feelings when Jang Uk confesses that he had grown to like Mu-Deok and missed her when she wasn't allowed into Songrim, Mu-Deok, unable to confront the truth, suggests that Jang Uk's feelings were her poisoning him. That is definitely not the cure he was hoping for. Feeling rejected, Jang Uk is disheartened for days after this conversation, especially when he learns that Mu-Deok might have feelings for Yul. As Jang Uk wrestles with his jealousy and the pressure to prove himself as a Songrim mage, Jin Mu meets and starts to manipulate a woman named Seo Yul, who arrived by boat to town a few days ago. Having grown up in the same village as Mu-Deok, Jin Mu convinces Seo Yul to pretend to be Bu-yeon, the oldest Jin daughter who is missing, presumed by many, except her mother, to be dead. Back at Songrim, Jang Uk finds himself facing more and more challenges in the training center, especially pushed by Mu-Deok's schemes to have him fight against multiple mages in a series of increasingly high-stakes battles. With the threat that a soul shifter is in their midst again, Park Jin decides to fortify Songrim's defenses, sending the more skilled members to Sejukwan, or the Songrim Infirmary, but specifically keeping Jang Uk behind. Instead, Jang Uk and Mu-Deok go to Cheonbugwan, admiring the constellation area, before they are interrupted by eunuch Kim and Jin Mu. Overhearing their conversation, Jang Uk and Mu-Deok hear how the eunuch, who is actually a soul shifter, begs Jin Mu to let him shift into Jin Ho-gyeong's body. Jin Ho-gyong being the leader of the Jin family. Having had enough, Jin-moo kills the eunuch and releases him to run wild, which is what it is called when soul shifters having fed on humans' energy turn into demon-like creatures. Jang Uk, caught in the middle, tries to help Mu-Deok against the chaotic eunuch. However, Jin-moo traps Jang Uk in a barrier and offers the eunuch to feed on Mu-Deok's energy. Desperate to save herself, Mu-Deok destroys the eunuch by feeding on his energy. However, despite being worried that she will run wild, as Jang Uk holds her in his arms and takes a leap, her arm drops into the water on the constellation basin, which results in stars filling the air. In fact, when Mu-Deok's arm dropped into the basin, she created a whole disturbance in the sky above them as the sky opened, triggering a surge in her powers. As lightning strikes the basin, Jang Uk pulls Mu-Deok away just in time. Jin-moo, noticing the damaged basin, begins to look for Jang Uk and Mu-Deok while also moving the eunuch's body to a secret place. Later, to protect himself, Jang Uk confronts Jin-moo in front of the royal court. When the crown prince questions Jin-moo about the eunuch, Jin-moo is left with nothing but flimsy excuses. However, when the eunuch walks in perfectly fine, having been revived by the powerful ice stone relic, the tables turn, and now Jang Uk has to come up with a justification for his accusations. Having no good reason to give, Jang Uk is put on probation. With no training to attend to, Jang Uk decides to join Master Lee for fishing, where he learns more about mastering Chisu, a skill he will need for his upcoming duel against none other than his best friend Yul. And the bet? Well, whoever wins will get to keep Mu-Deok as their maid. Sheesh, talk about slavery! When the day finally comes for the duel between Jang Uk and Yul, the stakes are super high. Despite Jang Uk having mastered Chisu, after fighting tooth and nail, Yul ultimately beats him. Does this mean that Mu-Deok works for Yul now? With jealousy and unspoken feelings thick in the air a little while later, Jang Uk finally kisses Mu-Deok. At the same time as Jang Uk is trying to understand his feelings better, Master Lee reveals to Jang Uk and the others that he is a soul shifter, which also means he can recognize other shifters. Has Master Lee known about Mu-Deok this whole time? As tensions rise, the king decides to use the Gwiju from before to help find the soul shifter within the palace. However, the queen, anxious about the potential chaos Gwiju could bring, tries to convince the king that using the Gwiju is a ploy by Songrim to undermine Chonbu Guan. You see, behind the scenes, the queen is anxious that the Gwiju could expose herself as a soul shifter. Secretly, the queen's body is being used by the evil shaman Choi, while the queen herself is trapped in the shaman's burnt and crippled body. At the same time, So-Yi manages to slip away and visit Mu-Deok. However, when they run into each other, Mu-Deok doesn't recognize her, which throws So-Yi off. As for Jin-Moo, he forces So-Yi to take in a bloodworm that will ensure her body has Jin blood, but will also eat her from the inside if she tries to escape. Back to the royal court, as Songrim asks Jin Yo-won for their support. In a dramatic turn, the Gwiju attacks Cho-yeon before being killed by Jin Ho-gyong. With the Gwiju dead, Mu-Deok wonders why on earth the Gwiju never attacked her. Meanwhile, So-Yi, still fully a puppet under Jin-Moo's control, prepares to enter the Jin family, ready to prove herself as Buyeon. Checking all her markings, when So-Yi, pretending to be Buyeon, is introduced as her long-lost daughter, Jin Ho-gyong is super optimistic and amazed. Could Buyeon really have been alive this whole time? However, there is one final test before the Jin family can truly accept So-Yi as Buyeon, opening the doors to Jin Yo-won, something that only a Jin family member can do. Of course, this is impossible. However, as So-Yi reaches for the doors, magically, they open. Little does anyone know that this has nothing to do with So-Yi and everything to do with Mu-Deok, who happens to also be there near the doors. While Mu-Deok is at the Jin family palace, Jang Uk is walking back home in the dark. However, he starts to feel himself being followed. When he turns around and draws his sword, he cannot be prepared for who stands in front of him. It's his father, Jung Gang. Jung Gang, recognizing Jang Uk's sword, cautions him not to be reckless, especially warning him against being so curious. This comes after Jang Uk and the crown prince go to a remote village to learn more about Shaman Choi. Although he never reveals to Jang Uk who he really is, this mysterious meeting and warning leave Jang Uk curious. Who was this mysterious stranger? Back at Songrim, Park Jin is starting to grow more suspicious of this new Buyeon, who has just shown up in the middle of nowhere, as well as her connection to the ice stone, which Jin-Moo is using as his bargaining chip with everyone. Not only has Jinmu been using the Ice Stone to consolidate his power, but he has also been proposing a new order within the palace, leveraging So Yi as Bouillon to push his agenda. In fact, Jinmu explains to Hogyong that the only way for them to move forward is for Songrim to completely collapse, which is why he starts attacking Songrim. With Shaman Choi secretly planning to use the Ice Stone to shift into So Yi's body, the king decides that they should check how powerful the stone is by bringing a dead person back to life. Who do they propose for this experiment? Mu-Deok, of course. Realizing that this could be the opportunity she has been waiting for to grab the Ice Stone, Mu-Deok agrees. But on the brink of death, Mu-Deok has a moment of revelation, recognizing herself as the real Bouillon. Calling out, "Mother," Mu-Deok shocks Hogyong, who is the one choking her. With the Ice Stone floating in front of her, inside the storm, Mu-Deok meets the real Jin Bouillon, who shares with her that the barrier is the Ice Stone itself. Which barrier? Well, since they used the Ice Stone, a mysterious wall has formed around Jongjin-jak, making all their spells and weapons useless. As for So Yi, fearing her cover will be blown if Mu-Deok is revived, she smashes the Ice Stone, which causes the storm to fade away, but the barrier to stay. Meanwhile, taking advantage of the chaos, Daeho, a wild soul shifter, is on the hunt for more prey. Devising a plan to save everyone, Jang Uk lures Daeho into the secret room, risking his own life. But Mu-Deok, determined to save him, intervenes using her powers, which suddenly come back to kill Daeho once and for all. In a flashback, we learn that Jinmu and Utak, Shaman Choi's brother, had gotten Bouillon to find the Ice Stone and then tried to drown her once they had it all those years ago. However, they failed, and instead, Bouillon was rescued by a kind older woman who named her Mu-Deok. So the body that Naksu shifted into was the real Jin Bouillon this whole time. Back to the present, having been attacked and wounded, Yul is saved by So Yi, who puts her bloodworm into his body. At the same time, the court all realizes that the queen is actually Shaman Choi, and Park Jin demands the return of the queen's body in exchange for Utak's life. Even Jin Mu turns against the queen. As for those still stuck inside the barrier, Jang Uk decides to try and break the barrier by striking a raindrop, despite objections from Mu-Deok and the Crown Prince. Hitting the drop culminates in a strange, ethereal experience, where Jang Uk holds the Ice Stone and creates the King's Star, which leads to the rain and the melting of the barrier. Everyone who watches assumes that the Crown Prince is behind it, unaware, of course, that Jang Uk was born under the King's Star. With the barrier broken, it seems that both Mu-Deok and Jang Uk have lost their powers, but they don't seem to mind. In fact, they get engaged. However, Jinmu hasn't stopped his scheming, trying to convince the Crown Prince to ally with him by suggesting that Jang Uk might be hiding his true power. Jinmu plans his revenge by using Shaman Choi's divination bells to make all the soul shifters run wild. On the day of Donggu and Choyeon's wedding, Mu-Deok succumbs to the bell's influence and starts killing several mages. As Jang Uk tries to stop her, Mu-Deok even stabs him. Bleeding out, Jang Uk begs her to snap out of it, and it works. However, coming back to her senses, Mu-Deok is horrified at what has happened. When the bells ring again, Mu-Deok leaves, and eventually, after the bells stop, she jumps into the lake, determined to die. Someone grabs Mu-Deok out of the water. As for Jang Uk, born under the King's Star, when his dead body is burned, the fire suddenly turns blue, and Jang Uk steps out again, seemingly reborn.